We're ready for our close-up.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. I almost caught him. You could see he's all kind of.
I'm all beautiful.
He's all moist, but he was just sitting there doing his man grooming roller thing, and I'm like, I really should just go live right while you're.
We're about to bring a kind of a big deal on our show. I want to look as good as possible. You know how that goes.
Yeah, for me, you don't care, but for someone else, yeah, whatever.
Welcome to Generational Change.
I'm Jen.
I'm Peter, and this is Wednesday night, and at the top of the hour, we've got a really important guest coming on our show right away.
I just watched the trailer of the movie. We're having
what is the
David
name of the
Sirota
movie?
is coming on. Don't Look Up is the name of the movie, and I just watched the trailer, and I'm sitting here just cracking up. But I don't want to waste our time with him playing it. Like, I don't know. I mean, that seems kind of.
He'll have lots to say about it.
Yeah, and then but maybe what we'll do is we'll show it after, or maybe if he says we can show. I mean, I don't know. I just don't want to waste his time playing, a clip.
You know him from The Intercept. You know him from the Bernie Sanders campaign. He is the founder of the Daily Poster and now the writer and I believe producer of the new Hollywood blockbuster Don't Look Up, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Jennifer Lawrence, and the legendary Meryl Streep. David Sirota, welcome back to Generational Change.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hi.
I love that shirt, brother. I can see it from
thank you
from a distance. Yeah, that's nostalgia. We've done right.
Yeah, I love that trailer. I don't know if I should know more about it, but it just looks really funny to me. But I love when Jennifer Lawrence plays a dork. First of all, that's she's really, and then Leo is yummy. But so how did you come? I mean, it's not a far-fetched thing, obviously, but talk about where this how this developed and you got involved in creating this movie.
Sure. Basically, Adam McKay and I have been friends for a long time, and he is the writer-director, screenwriter, director of the movie. You probably folks know him from, he was the director of The Big Short, he was the director of Vice, he was the director of and writer of Anchorman, of course. So
not my genre, but okay.
Yeah, he and I were talking about must have been 2.5, 3 years ago. And we were lamenting about how the media and the political system just doesn't seem to really care about climate change. And at one point I had said, it really does feel like there's an asteroid headed towards Earth and nobody cares. And he said, maybe that's the movie. Because he was looking for a way to address climate change in a way that was entertaining and fun. Which of course is difficult because climate change is the opposite of entertaining and fun. And he didn't want to do a kind of a post-apocalyptic Mad Max kind of movie. And so he said, maybe this is the movie. We started spitballing ideas, some scenes. He went to town writing a screenplay. I gave him notes, and that's really the history. I mean, he kept saying during that process, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. We're going to get these actors and this actor. And I kept kind of, not exactly eye rolling, but sort of yeah, okay, man, sure, right, yeah, right. And then I just didn't believe it would actually happen. And then essentially, he said, listen, we're going to be sending over a bunch of papers. We need you to sign them because this is literally actually happening right now. And so here we are.
No, I think it's awesome. And it sort of reminded me of a few things that were really good merged, I remember the movie, what was it, Mars Attacks, had that sort of really kind of campy vibe. And, then there's Deep Impact where they're taking it so seriously. And
right.
I love the idea of you taking something that would normally be a catastrophe and
right.
making it be farce, but yet it is kind of not funny that what's really happening with our media, and that this obviously takes it to the extreme, but the real thing is not quite as funny.
Yeah, I mean, obviously what's going on with climate is not funny at all. It's the most deadly serious crisis, arguably, that humanity has ever faced. And let's be clear about this movie. This movie is a satire. It's hilarious, but there's a really serious message in it. I won't give away the ending, but let's just say it's quite a big ending. And I hope people will take away from it that this movie is not destiny and it's not prophecy. It's a cautionary tale. It's a cautionary tale of what happens when we as a society don't listen to scientists. And the reason to make a movie like this is to kind of try to grab society by the lapels and say it doesn't have to be this way. There is a speech that Leonardo DiCaprio gives in the movie, and I won't give it away, but he essentially at one point in the movie says, we could have fixed this. And what he really is saying by that is, if we had acted earlier to fix this when we had the chance, this is a solvable problem. And so I hope the takeaway from the movie is not an asteroid's headed towards Earth and there's nothing that we can do, but something as serious as an asteroid headed towards Earth is happening right now, but we still have time to actually deal with the problem.
We're speaking with David Sirota, founder of the Daily Poster and writer for the new Hollywood movie, Don't Look Up. David, it seems that this film really is getting a lot of buzz, and I think it starts with the fact that Mr. DiCaprio is a huge advocate for environmental efforts. When you have somebody at that level in the film industry that really makes it his passion, I'd like to think that that's kind of rubbed off. Adam McKay, great guy. Again, many may not know this, but Adam McKay was a huge supporter of Bernie Sanders. So I think it really goes without saying that this is the type of project that may now allow more of that effort, because again, there's so many people who don't pay attention to politics, but they pay attention to what the Hollywood celebrities have to say.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking this is going to potentially break through. What are your feelings on that? And obviously working on a project with somebody who really makes the environment, a hallmark of what he's trying to accomplish these days.
Well, first and foremost, I think it really is a star-studded cast. And I think there's two things to say about that. One, I really appreciate all of these celebrities being willing to make a politically risky, controversial movie. I think it's a great movie, but certainly politically controversial, and that they were willing to use their platforms it's not to say that it's a huge sacrifice for them. They're in a huge movie, but it is to say that they didn't have to do this movie. There are easier paths in Hollywood than doing a movie like this. And these very, very well-known people use their platform to try to get a really serious message out there. And so I really appreciate that. Now, I also think that part of the comedy in the movie is that we are such a celebrity obsessed culture that we can't pay attention to serious things. And so in a certain way, casting the celebrities, like so many celebrities, is kind of acknowledging that that's the world we live in. And I think some of the buzz about the movie that's come out of from the movie at the beginning, there's a lot of the headlines you'll look, it's like Leo saying something about Meryl Streep and all sort of frivolous, somewhat fun but somewhat gossipy stuff. That's been the coverage, some of the coverage of the movie, not all, but some of it. And it's sort of like, yeah, it kind of proves that we're so, as a culture, so enamored with celebrity, it's hard for us to focus on serious issues. And to be clear, we're all caught in that. I mean, we're all part of that. There's a character in the movie who's a NASA scientist who is trying to sound the alarm, but at one point, even he is sort of, you see him kind of laughing about celebrity culture. I mean, that is the culture that we live in. And I hope this movie sort of makes us aware of the downfalls of becoming so obsessed with that it's to the exclusion of everything else.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I want to look out there and say, if you can name all the Kardashians, but you can't name the members of the Supreme Court, that is the problem. Right there is the problem. So I'm just saying, but that's what we are dealing with. And I have to say also, like regarding Meryl Streep, she doesn't ever make anything that isn't worthwhile, and she just wouldn't. She's not one, not that any of those people do, but it's like, to me, Meryl Streep is sort of like the best a stamp of approval that somebody can get on their project, to me.
I mean, she's fantastic, and she's particularly fantastic in this movie. She plays the president. She's sort of a mix of a little bit. I saw Adam McKay mention that she's sort of a little bit a Susie Orman with Donald Trump, and you don't know which political party she's in. So she is really, really terrific, and we got to meet her at the premiere, and she was really a terrific person. We didn't get to meet all of the stars. I didn't because they filmed this movie in the middle of COVID. in winter of I think it was 2021, when there was no vaccine. You had to quarantine to get on the set. They asked me to come out there, but I would have had to be away from my family for probably a month or more, and I just didn't get to. So we got to meet them at some of these folks at the premiere, and look, I said to them to each of them that I met, I said, listen, I just really want to thank you for being willing to use your notoriety and fame to try to make a movie to sound the alarm about the climate crisis. I mean, it is a complete embarrassment that for our culture, I think for the entertainment and media industries as a whole, that it's taken this long for there to be a really major blockbuster movie essentially about the climate crisis. I mean, it really shouldn't have taken this long. And this is, I think it's fair to say, this is the first really big blockbuster movie about not just the climate crisis, but about the political crisis that is continuing to have us not really respond in an adequate way to that crisis.
Which we always bring back to the be all end all, which is corporate special interest money. Because if the military industrial complex, the fossil fuel industry, and big agri if it wasn't so profitable for them to be them, and we could care about the environment. And those are the people that are keeping us from being able to really do anything.
And you really have to wonder. No, go ahead.
I totally agree. No, I just was going to say, I totally agree with you.
And I really think it speaks to, again, where we are. We're at ground zero. We're in South Florida. Anytime it rains, especially North Miami, it floods. And it's getting to the point now, we talk about this, that if by some chance, let's say next summer, a devastating hurricane finds its way to South Florida, you're going to have potentially hundreds of thousands of people that will be displaced.
Yeah. And it doesn't, honestly, and I keep telling him, it won't even have to be a category 3 or higher. It could be a 1 or 2 that just sits over us for such a long period of time. And that's what we're seeing with these storms. And we just saw it with these tornadoes. They're bigger, but they're lasting longer.
And you speak better to this than I would. But
I've been in a hurricane.
Well, if you can talk about what it means to, any development that's happened, and half our state is below Lake Okeechobee. Yeah. But the fact that it was never meant to be developed.
No. And I'm a second generation native Floridian. So I grew up down here. I've seen the changes, the overdevelopment, what it's doing. I mean, like, I see it in my lifetime. But anything south of Lake Okeechobee is swamp and Everglades that we dredged, built canals, rerouted things and did stuff. Well, that doesn't work long term, right? Like, the earth has other plans and other thoughts, and yet they keep building, even though we know this now. It's sort of like the people that keep smoking even once or they start smoking after knowing. I don't understand. And yet they won't stop building here. And we're going to all be underwater. I think in my lifetime, it will be uninhabitable for sure in Miami, but I think even maybe as far up as Lake Okeechobee. I could live a long time.
What's been the response so far? I mean, obviously, on the one hand, it's the movie's definitely getting Oscar buzz, and we know that it's gotten a lot of attention, but there has to be some pushback. There has to be some PR saying that this movie's a crock and you shouldn't watch it and all that.
There's got to be haters. There's always haters.
What's been the experience thus far in terms of the positive versus the negative?
It's as I said at the beginning of when the movie came out, I said to a local newspaper here in Denver, I said, look, this is not a movie that's designed to make people feel comfortable. It's not a consensus movie. When you make a movie about the present day and about a crisis like this and about the politics of our country in the moment, it's bound to be polarizing. And that's exactly what's happened. You've got some reviewers are mad at the movie for being what some of them have said is not subtle. My response to that is, if you think a movie about climate change isn't subtle, wait till you learn about climate change, because that's not subtle either. So there's been that kind of reaction. But I will also say there's been a ton of great reaction. I mean, really, like, we've gotten really good reviews in some cases across the political spectrum. I mean, we got a great review in everything from the New York Post to the Economist to the New York Times to the Washington Post. I mean, think about how wide an ideological gap that is. So, look, I think the reaction to this is going to be all over the place because it deals with a topic and a set of phenomena that make people uncomfortable. But again, this movie is not made for, it's not really made for the media. It is made for the broad public. And I would say this, this movie uses a story that a lot of us are familiar with, a kind of a Hollywood, big blockbuster Hollywood storyline, kind of like Armageddon.
Right.
Puts it with comedy in order to deliver a very serious message to as wide an audience as possible. And I think that needs to be appreciated. That, in other words, we use the techniques of a big movie that large audiences are familiar with. It's got comedy, it's got huge stars, and we use all of that in service of a really, really important message. And look, that's why some people have said, I can't believe you're involved in a movie. It's just super weird that you're involved in a movie. And my response to that is, well, this is kind of part of the work that I do anyway. Like, it's not a departure from my work. It's part of that work.
Yeah, I also want to touch on something you had said about like across the political spectrum, because something we have noticed is that a lot of our very pro-environment people are Republicans down here. And we also see a lot of the rural parts of this country that are very red, places like Idaho, that really care about their environment. So it is something that matters, I think, across the political spectrum. And I, they always in the media tend to highlight the people on the right that don't believe climate crisis is real. That is a very small sliver of people that don't believe, like, really it is. I mean,
especially today.
It really is. And I know some very conservative people, they absolutely think climate crisis is real. So that's something I feel like the media obviously does to keep us all fighting and divided, because I have proven that untrue.
I think it's a reflection also, we don't have to get too political, but obviously just what happened this afternoon with Speaker Pelosi saying that I don't care if, we basically are committing insider trading. And all I could think of is, I don't think anybody's okay with this. I don't think anybody across any political spectrum, and just as we've seen with the Biden administration, and everyone just wants to do the rotating villain, blaming Sinema, blaming Manchin. It's like, no, we understand that the overwhelming majority of people agree on the primary issues. The people who pull the levers of power do not answer to the people. I'm willing to bet that a lot of people on the political right feel the same way. They're like, we actually agree on a number of these issues, but the McConnells of the world that pull the levers of power, they are not answering to the people. And corporate media has done an amazing job of convincing us that, that other side is the enemy.
And they're not. And they absolutely are. There are many red environmentalists.
The question now becomes, how do we unite people? There's always going to be this consensus of not wanting to listen to people like AOC and all that jazz. I'm at a loss now in terms of how do we bring people together, because we've become such a polarized society, such a hyper partisan society. There's got to be a way to break through that force field. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think part of it is comedy. I think that at least when it comes to a movie, I mean, I think comedy, helps us laugh at ourselves. I think in a lot of ways, comedy can bring us together. So I think that's one technique. I mean, that's not necessarily a political technique outside of movies and television. But I also think, I think that as the climate crisis, unfortunately and inevitably gets worse, I think that that the science becomes more and more difficult to ignore. And I think keeping the debate rooted in science is really the key, because we can all have our ideologies, we can all have our whichever party we affiliate with, but I think the science really should be the thing that we can agree on, and that to me is really at the heart of this movie, which is to say that the movie really is about scientists trying to get political leaders and the media to stipulate the science, accept the science, and then focus on constructively dealing with the crisis inside the movie. It's the same thing with climate change. We can have our debates about what needs to be done to deal with climate, what the priorities should be. But first and foremost, we have to be willing to accept the science and the reality of the situation before we can even get to what needs to be done.
Yeah, absolutely.
We do worry about the fact that comedy has changed quite a bit in the last few years. We don't have the type of raw comedy. I'm not saying everybody has to be like George Carlin, but
we've
seen,
crossed over to the overwoke.
Yeah, that is a big problem. And I love how, forgive me for saying this, Jen, but David is in Colorado. I love how South Park pokes fun at that, how they went right to it the other day and was like, yeah, comedy's dead and we got to save it. And I agree with you that I think comedy is a great uniter, just like I think the labor movement in many ways is the great uniter. You know, if you're at a comedy show, you're not asking what somebody's political affiliation is. Right. Just like if you're in a you're in a union, you don't care if a person's a Bernie or a Trump supporter. You just care that, you know, we're trying to work together to fight the common good for, you know, making sure we have good rights. And I do think that that is something that is going to be a hallmark going forward. Now, the question is, how do we bottle that up? Because things are pretty dire right now, which I think is just, and correct me if I'm wrong, and this is something we've been talking about a lot lately, which is there's sort of been this evolution. Millions upon millions of people woke up into politics in the summer of 2015 between Bernie and Trump. And in many cases, they were novices. They didn't know how the sausage was made. They weren't, you know, when you would get hit with, you know, punches from all over the place, you wouldn't know how to react. But I think we've gotten to the point now where the substantial the overwhelming majority of people in this movement, they're aware of how the game is played now. Now the question is, how do we, you know, go forward and not get fooled as many have been for so long?
It's a great question. I mean, it's a really great question. And we're really at a moment of peril right now where the Democrats don't seem to be interested really in delivering anything on their promises. I mean, they came out of the gate, I think, pretty strong earlier this year when Biden was sworn in. I mean, strong in the sense of they understood they needed to cut a big check and they needed that check, parts of that check, a large part of that check to go to regular working people. And that's a departure from what the Obama administration had done in 2009, 2010, which is, I think a lot of people, if you look back at what happened, a lot of people felt like the Obama administration was mostly focused on bailing out bankers and not really helping average people. And so, you know, I think that but I think now, especially with the Build Back Better bill, I think that the Democrats seem to be running out of gas and in some ways seem to be just giving up ahead of the midterms. I mean, look what we're doing heading towards the midterms. I mean, Biden is talking about restarting student loans, loan repayments. The child tax credit may be cut off. I mean, if you wanted to try to lose a midterm election, that is what you would do.
He just said that.
Yeah, I mean, and that is, and the obviously when it comes back to the climate, I mean, the problem is that the Democrats may be bad. I mean, Biden, you know, has allowed more drilling on public lands than even Trump, but the Republicans are far worse. So we are really caught in a really horrible situation right now. And I wish I had good answers about what could be done, but I don't. There's no easy fix to this.
I do think that the biggest reason that we always say corporate special interests capturing our government, that is the issue of our time. We almost don't even need to address anything else until we address that.
Well, yeah, I always say if we had publicly financed elections and there was no money exchange and people who were in politics were actually public servants and even whatever, term limits or not, but they were public servants, we wouldn't be having these discussions like that. That's the ultimate problem with all of this because people are making money. And somebody had asked a question. Will you go back up to the question there?
Sure. Which one?
I don't know. It was Colorado. This. No. Yeah. Here. This. Can anyone tell me why government and corporate buildings are not insulated to reduce the need for natural gas to heat and cool buildings? I can tell you why. It wasn't profitable to do so. Now, either it's that the guys who are on the take from the natural gas company or they don't get enough kickbacks from the insulation company to make worth their while. That's why, because somebody's profiting for it to not be so. That's my general answer to everything about this.
I really think that just the whole two-party duopoly and the way that people could really be interested in an issue. They can be really interested in a candidate. They can be really interested in a cause. But the second it becomes a red or blue thing, that's it. They're out. I don't want to be a part of this. I don't like this party.
It's very
off-putting.
It's very off-putting to just normal people that aren't like politicos.
and that's also why I like the Sunrise Movement, because I think they've done a pretty good job, even though they tend to lean with support to the Democratic Party. They really try to maintain a neutrality in the sense that we're really only focused on the environment.
They've endorsed independence.
They have. Too. And so I'm guessing that as we wind the conversation down, that is something that you think is going to be essential going forward, because that's why Andrew Yang is doing what he's doing. That's why people feel that, we've got to try something else. Because things right now are looking like Trump or DeSantis in 24. And that's obviously, a pretty unfortunate thing to have to think about in this moment. But we also have to recognize, what can we do to sort of mitigate that problem and continue to evolve? Because again, so many people want to be involved, but there is this barrier that I think is preventing them from wanting to be involved.
No, I totally agree. And I think you're right to always bring up the profit motive. I think you're right to always follow the money. I mean, money determines outcomes right now in politics. And I think we have to understand that almost every action that you see in Congress is a result of one set of money interests winning over the people and other interests. And so I think, obviously the interests that have such a financial interest in continuing the climate crisis, or at least not stopping what is causing the climate crisis, they remain incredibly, incredibly powerful. And so focusing on that and spotlighting every single day who is doing the bidding of the interests that are creating this crisis, which threatens the survival of the ecosystem, and therefore the survival really of our species, focusing on who is getting paid out, who is making money, that is the key.
Yeah. And that's what I see everywhere now. I almost feel like, in movies when you could sort of see the things and like they could see it in like 3D. I almost feel like everywhere I look now, all I see is the money exchanging and the corruption, because it's so blatant and it's everywhere. When I'm driving on the highway and it's filthy and dirty, and I live in one of the richest states in the country, and my roads are filthier than I have been on back roads in Costa Rica that are more well kept than our highways here. That's de facto corruption, because I know they have the money and I know the work's not being done. And all I just see is corruption everywhere now. But I'm so tainted.
But I also think we are getting to the point where something's going to give, because as you just alluded to, David, the corruption really is out in the open now. Like, they don't hide it anymore. That's why Pelosi will go on national television and say, hey, here's what I think of your regulations. It's like, at this point, they're not even being subtle about it. And they're acknowledging that, yeah, he would say it's a big club and you ain't in it. No, it's a small club and you're not invited. And that's basically how they've treated it. And so while everybody's focusing on Congressman Boebert, for example, yeah, that's the shiny object on the wall. But in reality, she's just a very small symptom in a much larger problem. And so, if we're ever going to get anywhere, I think this conversation is so essential. So is there a place where anybody can check out the, maybe some clips of the movie?
And wait, is this open in theaters now? Because I haven't been going to theaters anymore. I was a hermit pre-COVID, so COVID has not exactly helped. But
this would be worth going to the movie.
Okay, and I do like popcorn. So it's in the theaters now?
It is in a limited set of theaters, 500 or so across the country. It will be on Netflix on Christmas Eve. And if you just Google Netflix, don't look up, you will find all of the previews. I think you'll find them pretty funny. The movie, again, it's a serious movie, but there's a lot of laughing in this movie.
I think we should play the trailer, Introduction to Festivus.
Yeah, go for it.
There you go.
Is that cool? Because we're having a Festivus.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Thing. So we'll play the trailer like as an intro to our Festivus before we go live.
Talk about airing of grievances.
It's the airing of grievances. Well, we do. I mean, and I just think it'll be a good intro if that's cool with you.
For sure, go for it.
Yeah. All right, guys. So you got to check out the movie. I'm very impressed. Very all-star studded. Very impressive. And,
hey, whatever gets butts in the seats. I mean, that's what it's all about.
It's like you really have to reach the people where they are.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
Guys, if you are not currently subscribed to the Daily Poster, please do get subscribed, get involved. David has incredible work that he puts out constantly. Does stuff in conjunction with another great group that we've had on the show, which is More Perfect Union, highlighting all the things in terms of the labor movement. Obviously, if you like Walker Bragman, as we do, he also writes for them. So definitely subscribe. Definitely check it out. David, thanks as always. Happy holidays. And we hope this is a great success. Let's keep the conversation going, brother.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Bye. Shout out Jason Calls on. I haven't seen you in a while. The Pelosi thing. That's what you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, well, it's a perfect segue to our next guest, because Lord knows he's going to have a thing or two to say. You know, when we talk about the division in America, and you talk about the way that, you know, you have urban and suburban America, and then, of course, you have rural America.
You say that's so funny to me.
Rural doesn't sound
no,
real.
It's kind of weird.
Okay, well, fair enough.
Rural.
No, that's better.
Rural. It's rural.
Well, the gentleman who lives in Floribama will be able to let us know.
Okay, but can you not belittle him and waste his time with the political stuff like about that? Like, I don't know. He's
How about I just
so
sit
much
over
better
here
than
and you
that.
can have the
No,
conversation.
I'm
I'll just
saying that like there's a lot of better things to talk about with him than Nancy Pelosi's nonsense.
If there is anybody who can get to the heart of what goes on in the part of the country that no one talks about in the corporate media, this is also, as a former producer and friend of the show, John Holt just
thank you actually, John, for letting me know that. So apparently
10th anniversary of Christopher Hitchens'
the 10th anniversary of Christopher Hitchens' death. And so
talk
people
about
who
speaking
don't
truth
know,
to power.
Anybody who, if you ever get an email from me, it's always signed in reason, passion, and justice. And the reason portion is from Hitchens. So he is somebody that I've always really been a fan of. If you haven't read God Is Not Great, I highly recommend.
Started our podcast just over a year ago. We're grateful for every one of you that are here and supporting our show. He was our second guest, believe it or not. And he is somebody who
was our first guest?
Shahid.
Oh, that's right.
And so while we are continuing to grow, we are extremely grateful to have the support of somebody who is your Mr. Rogers, as you like to say.
He is my Mr. Rogers. And every time he's like, well, howdy there, internet people. It's Beau again. And every time, without fail, whether I'm alone in my bathroom or not, I always go, hi, Beau.
And he knows you're saying hi, so there you go. You know him from Beau the Fifth Column on YouTube. He is here crossing over into Generational Change. Beau the Fifth Column, welcome back to Generational Change.
How's it going?
Good. You know you are absolutely one of my most favorite people. And the reason is you are politically proper without being politically proper. You somehow have managed to find this lane that I've never seen anybody do it, where you're not wishy-washy on anything. Like, it's very clear what you think, but you're so tactful in getting it through. Like, I've never seen anybody do that the way you do that was legitimately not a wiffle waffle.
I don't know. I think a lot of people cut me slack. Like when it comes to criticism and stuff like that, I think I get cut a lot of slack because I think people get that I'm trying to reach out to people who aren't politically active, so they let me get away with a little bit more. So
I think you undervalue. I think you underestimate yourself. Like, and I've noticed that from, how you've grown. I started watching, I don't even know when I started watching you, but you've grown exponentially. You're way up there now, and there's a reason. You know what I mean? Like, you need to know that. Obviously you appreciate your numbers, but like, there's a reason people really like you, and it isn't, just because, the ZZ Top thing. Like, there's well, I don't know. Now I'm really aging myself.
And now I got Back to the Future 3 in my head. So thanks for that one. There you go.
Really? That's where you go with that?
ZZ Top's, that song was great.
No, I think the thing about it is you really make things easy for people to understand in a way that really distinguishes between legality and morality. And I think I saw when I was looking for pictures of you, which, by the way, some new headshots would be appreciated.
Yeah, I'm going to get on that. I saw the one that was used on the promo. I was like, wow, that was a decade ago.
There are none. Like, there's none for the taking. And most of them are mid-speak that are like freeze frames from the show that are not very necessarily flattering. So, yeah. But, like, when you explain things to people, they just get it in a way, I think, that other people can't explain it to them. And there is this big difference between morality and legality. And I found a quote that you had said. I would have used that picture, but it's in black and white. Do you know which one I'm talking about? If you Google you and hit images, it's one of the first ones. But like, it's a quote that you said saying that the difference between morality and legality. And I think that you make it where it's not about politics. It's about being doing what's right. And I think that's, again, it's the Mr. Rogers thing.
We are obviously hitting a crisis point in this country. We are hyper partisan divided, and obviously Florida is a great example of that. Obviously we have our rural areas, which you are in the Panhandle. You have your very urban areas, which is where we are in Southeast Florida. Trying to figure out what we can do to sort of bridge that divide. Obviously, we just had on David Sirota talking about his film Don't Look Up and how the climate crisis is obviously hitting a breaking point. Doing a major Hollywood movie might attract a lot of people's attention. So now the question becomes, what are your thoughts as far as, how we more or less bring more people together to fight for the common issues that I think most of us agree on?
Well, I cheated. I was listening to the show. I think you're onto something when you're talking about labor. I think that's the way to go about it. There's always going to be more of a working class than any other demographic. In the system we have, we're going to have that aspect in common. Anybody who works for a living is going to, well, yeah, they're gonna have a boss who most times isn't great, and you can use that to build some kind of common ground, and then move out from there. And then, yeah, the environment is another one. Even where I live, where it's entirely red, you do find conservationists. It's a different kind because it's more of, this is my piece of dirt, and on my piece of dirt, I want the creek clean, I want the animals, and they're willing to kind of safeguard the land themselves. I think those are the two big uniting things that can be used.
Yeah, I saw you did something recently where you were talking about Yellowstone. And I guess, was there comments that I don't know if you had gotten an email or comments about somebody saying something, or it was like over woke or whatever it was about Yellowstone. Mm-hmm. And so then, of course, now I've been binge watching this show. And have you seen it?
Good.
It's really good. But okay, I have a Kevin Costner thing, but it's basically like Dallas meets Legends of the Fall. That's what it is to me, with, with
I can see that.
You know what I mean? Like with the son who kind of just goes off and it's very interesting. But it's trite. Like there's certain things about it that are definitely trite, but I think that it's not that unrealistic in terms of what they're doing in this show. Like it's about like land and who wants to own it, and the issues with the tribal nations and all. I mean, I think it's actually really good.
Yeah.
Am I missing something?
No, I mean, there's a little bit more gunplay than actually occurs out in the middle of nowhere, but you need that for TV. But as far as the struggle, yeah, you try to take somebody's ranch, and there's going to be consequences to it. So there is a lot of accuracy to it. But yeah, I did. I got a whole bunch of people got mad because they put an animal rights activist show, or a character who was explicitly an animal rights activist character on the show. And it threw them through a loop, and they're like, I can't believe they're addressing social topics and all of this stuff. And I'm like, they've done that throughout the entire show.
Right. Yeah, they really have. And I haven't gotten to that part yet. So I'm still in season 1. I think there's been 3.
Yes, if I remember correctly, that's how far along they've gotten. And I think that is, again, when we're talking about the rural versus the urban and even suburban, there really is that big divide. I mean, we've had a couple of guests recently that talk about one of the major issues being centralized planning versus decentralized planning. People who live in rural parts of the country typically are a lot more resourceful. They can do things that people in urban and suburban places cannot.
Oh, in the apocalypse, all of us here, we're all dying. Okay, people, no, seriously, no. I mean, the people in the Tri-County, we're all dead. Okay, those of us who might be able to get out into the rural, everyone else will be just fine. Just so you know, probably better off without us. But I'm just putting that out there. I'm sorry.
Well, then of course we see that is a huge dividing factor, because everyone who flocks to the urban centers are typically liberal, and people who flock to the very rural centers are typically conservative. And that's, I think, one of the biggest issues because of centralized planning. We find ourselves looking at people who live different lives as being the other. And that, I think, is one of the biggest dividing lines. And what you do with your show is really try to debunk that myth that, we're all just, Bible thumpers, not really recognizing reality. And that's not true. I think that one thing we did mention is, as particularly when it comes to non-corporate left politics, a lot of people really do agree on the primary issues, but we see what people do on Capitol Hill. They're not serving them. I would like to think, and you can probably speak much better to this, that people who are conservative in rural parts of the country probably share a lot of similar sentiments on major issues, and they're fed up with the way that their political representation in the GOP ultimately governs. I think that there probably is a lot of common ground there. How do you feel about that?
Absolutely. Here, it's not so much about DC. Here where I live, it's more about Tallahassee. And this is an incredibly red area. I want to say 80%.
Yeah.
But they still refer to DeSantis as that idiot in Tallahassee. Here, it's more about wanting to be left alone and wanting, as long as you're not hurting anybody, do whatever you want. And there's a lot of common ground that can be found there when it comes to more socially progressive causes. So the Republican side in the rural area, they are fed up, but all of these people that they go to bed and they got that gun on their nightstand. So getting them to go to a different party, getting them to go to vote Democrat, that's not happening. That's a single issue voter right there.
Yeah, no, I have to just also say something. You don't watch, like, I'm daily Beau watcher, okay? And I know that he has a broader variety, and I have a much smaller group. But anyway, so Beau did something that we had talked about. He did a thing, and I just have to say, anybody who threatens to take your guns away in Texas cannot get elected to a statewide office.
Right.
And I lived in Texas for 6 years. And as soon as he said that back then, and guys, if you don't know, we're talking about Beto. He made a comment about, I'm coming for your guns. We turned to each other.
Just call him Robert.
We turned to each other and I'm like, there goes that political career down the drain in Texas. And yet he's running for governor.
And he's going to have a lot of money. And the investment's going to be heavy from the suburban liberals. And
they cannot tell. Well, explain how that goes over with like people in
he is going to lose to Governor Abbott by 10 points or more.
Yeah, I definitely think he's going to lose. Because I don't think he understands that even a lot of the very, very, very blue areas there, they're armed. I mean, yes. It's Texas. I mean, I don't know why somebody would make that statement and then be like, I'm going to run in Texas.
Austin is not Los Angeles. It's not.
Right.
But it's just like, who does that? And it's like, it was almost like, it's like a joke to me. Like how does he possibly think that can work?
But I think that that's really the big divide. That's where the two parties are right now. Basically the Democrats control all the major city centers and the Republicans control everything else. Mm-hmm. And that is a divided nation if there ever is.
Which is why the unifier is labor.
Yes, 1,000%. And is it any surprise to you that on Friday, Max Alvarez of Real News is going to be hosting a major fundraiser for the Kellogg's workers who are on strike. And it just so happens that Bernie Sanders is going to Michigan in support of those workers. Why isn't President Biden going there?
Well, can he make that kind of trip?
Well, again, but that to me is that really is at the heart of where we are right now, I think.
People, establishment politicians in general, they have issue with unions. Even like, I've been doing this thing with this mine that's on strike in Alabama. Yeah. For the politicians to go there and just show up to one of the strike rallies, express a little bit of support, it costs them nothing and it would get them votes, but they don't do it because they're worried about the message it sends to their corporate donors. It's a really interesting dynamic because there's literally nothing to lose by showing up. Everybody supports this crew of people. The entire town is built around the mine. You show up and support the miners, you're going to get those votes.
Yeah, we had, what was the gentleman's name? I feel bad. We had one of the miners on strike.
Chris Lawson. Not the mine. I was thinking of
We've
the guy
had
in
so
Iowa.
many different labor people on for different things, and I won't remember names. I'd know him if I saw him, but we had one of the miners on, and something that really stuck with me is that, and this is different in mining communities versus like Amazon workers or Starbucks workers. There's a difference in terms of the community, and they were so much more like caring for themselves, and they were much more set up to be able to strike, having their community network. And I think, you know, when you're looking at mining towns, that makes sense, right? You put like probably generations of people that have been doing this. We need to get that in with the retail people, because the retail people don't have that sort of like family heritage tradition, small community vibe necessarily, you know?
I think this is a great opportunity to talk about what just happened. As you saw the other day in Kentucky, obviously unbelievably devastating with the tornadoes. But of course, the story that I think should lead to, in my opinion, the biggest class action lawsuit the world has ever seen. And that, of course, is against Jeff Bezos and Amazon, because records are already coming out that the workers who died in I think it was Edwardsville, Illinois, that died in the collapse of the warehouse distribution center, they tried to leave and they told them, you ain't leaving. And now they're dead. As far as I'm concerned, if that ain't late stage capitalism, I don't know what is. That's as blatant as it gets. And it's like we've got to make a stand at some point.
He is so evil. Like he is a parody of himself.
He looks like Dr. Evil.
No,
that's not a mistake.
Evil. Yeah.
I think that part's intentional. I think he does that on purpose. The style that he's going with now. Yeah, I haven't gone through all of the stuff from the collapse there. But I have seen some screenshots of some of the text messages and stuff like that. And it is definitely something that needs to be looked into. I'm not sure, because none of the messages really that I've seen explain what the process was, what their thought process was. I don't know if it was other people saying, don't leave because the storm's right outside, or it's don't leave because we need you to go back to work as soon as it passes. And, you know, there's a difference. One was an attempt to keep them safe. One was just more exploitation. And until I know which it is,
See, this is what I love about you. You totally understand the concept of nuance. And it's fascinating, because that's something that we've lost completely, especially in digital and online media. Like that's, I think, the biggest part of the reason why we can't get along is because our communication is, there's no nuance anymore. So everything is like a pick and an offense, and everybody's feelings get hurt, and it's like, yeah. But I think that's part, and I think you're right. It's completely context. And it will be taken out of context by either side to make it look however benefits whatever side that is. That's what's so frustrating. Instead of it being, we just know this because we just know that they were being concerned. No, and I am very anti-Amazon. Let me put that. I'm not like a Amazon person, but this could be, like you're saying, something that was legitimately out of concern. And it will be made to make them as evil as possible. I'm not entirely opposed to that part of it.
That might be one of those things. If it circulated and it came out and they're like, this was the catalyst that looked like it was going to get unions going, and I found out that, you know, they really were just trying to keep them safe, I might take a few days off and not record. I mean,
you wouldn't lose sleep over it at all, though, is what.
No.
Yeah, that's how I feel too, for sure.
Yeah, a friend of the show, Robin Bennett, says they had about a 40-minute window when they knew that the tornadoes were going to hit. I mean, again, I guess it depends on...
I don't know enough about that location. I don't know. And by the way, from my understanding, this was a massive tornado. Yes. Like it covered the scope of the tornado.
There were massive tornadoes.
Yeah, no. But there were a few that were just, the size of them are getting bigger and bigger than they used to be, and they're lasting longer.
Of course. And this is, again...
we haven't seen something like this, I don't think.
I'll tell you, I have never heard of anything like what happened in Kentucky.
Yeah.
Like that to me, I don't know that they have ever had storms that had that long of a track there. That's wild.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Why? And we know, and there's we know why this is happening. Same reason hurricanes are sitting over islands longer and longer.
Well, and then of course the divide just gets worse and worse, because you see, the upper liberal class trying to chastise the people of Kentucky because Senator Paul, who is a fierce libertarian, is like, I don't want to, earmark all this extra FEMA money. Now all of a sudden he needs it, and their attitude is like, well, you had your chance.
Right. So screw the people of Kentucky.
Are you kidding me?
We're gonna screw the people of Kentucky. We don't like Rand Paul. Like this is the level of discourse.
This is not like this money is going in Rand Paul's pocket. This is money that is going to people who are in desperate need of help.
Right. And it was such an unforced error on his part too, because it's not like Biden wasn't going to send the money. I mean, after that, there was disaster aid was coming. Why he sent that letter and altered his position on that, I will never understand. But that's going to be something that continues to come back and bite him. Which again, I'm not really that opposed to.
Right.
Well, if that's going to help get Charles Booker into the U.S. Senate, obviously that wouldn't be a bad thing. So, every once in a while, you get
I don't loathe Rand Paul. Okay, I don't loathe Rand Paul because he's not corporate bought, and he's only one of two people in that Senate that are not corporate whores. And so, while I do not agree with Rand Paul, I do not loathe Rand Paul.
And how he's not bought, Beau, is because him and Bernie are basically the only two senators who speak up against the military-industrial complex and all the problems that we see. You can't afford to do this, you can't afford to do that. Oh, but they just passed the $750 billion defense budget today because there's always enough. There will always be enough money for that. There's
always enough money for war. I mean, that is what it is, and that's the state we're in. We have to defend. We have to have to, in quotes, all of our, I don't want to say colonies, all of our interests overseas. So we need this massive war machine. It would be great if we had a system that wasn't designed around that. But that's, the idea of cutting the defense budget, it's one of those things that before that happens, we've got to get another system in place that isn't reliant on exploiting other countries. That's why they have to have it. So, I mean, we've got to change a lot of hearts and minds before that becomes a political reality.
Yeah.
Why do you think so many people are afraid to touch Julian Assange, especially right now in lieu of everything that's going on? And it's not so much, I mean, obviously, credit to Mehdi Hassan on MSNBC today, who bucked Joe Scarborough and his nonsense to say that.
I can't believe you're bringing that up now because we have a segment.
We will, but I'm just saying that the fact that, he's the one person in corporate media, aside from, of all people, Tucker Carlson, who speak up in defense of Assange and in defense of, the First Amendment. But you also kind of see it on, independent media as well. There's a lot of people who don't want to touch it. And I'm kind of perplexed about it. I mean, I think it's really just about people thinking about their careers and thinking if they talk about it, that they're going to get demonetized and things like that.
We do get demonetized from talking about Julian Assange if you even use his name. And Beau is incredibly careful on how he names things, how he mentions things.
Well, whatever what's the code? What's the code?
No, he does it in a way. It's really brilliant. He knows what I'm talking about. Like you talk about complete things without even mentioning the thing. And yet everyone knows what you're talking about. I can't do that. The thing. No, but he does that in a way, and everyone knows. And it could be whatever it is he's talking about. We're not that good. That's the problem, and that's why we get demonetized.
We're not so
well with Assange. I think one of the things is you have a whole bunch of people who have different reasons for not wanting to talk about it. Some of it is simple. It's the math. It's if I talk about this, maybe I get demonetized over some other thing that I bring up along it. I don't actually think that Assange is one of the key words, but I mean, it might be. Then you
not
have the people
demonetized, but deplatformed. Like you get put to the bottom of the pile.
That may be. But I know that there are people who don't want to talk about him because of his supporters, which was a weird thing to hear. He has this very strong, loyal base that goes to bat for him, and they show up anytime somebody talks about him. And then they apparently continue to ask that person to continue to talk about them over and over and over again. And people have started trying to avoid that, which seems odd to me. And then you have the people who, because of WikiLeaks' role, that's probably your key word right there. Because of their role in a lot of U.S. political issues, they don't want to touch it because they don't like WikiLeaks for whatever reason.
Exposing the war machine.
Yes, but yet I look at people who are content creators, even if you're not a journalist, even if you're a content creator, if you are not defending Julian Assange, it's like you're really not seeing the forest through the trees. Like I do not understand. I don't care what you do or do not like about him. If you're a content creator and or a journalist and you don't understand that it's important to support people when what they're saying is what you don't like, that's the whole point of the First Amendment. If we were all just speaking pleasantries, we wouldn't need that as protected. So like, it's frustrating when you have to explain this to people that are content creators. Like I feel like that should be a very, we should all agree on that, just like the sky is blue, just like everything, you know?
Noam Chomsky is very direct about that, about this. It is not about protecting speech you like, it's about protecting speech you don't like.
Yeah.
And that to me is the great issue in terms of our divide right now. It's like if Trump was president, they felt that this was something that would benefit the left against Trump. They would use it as a political football. But because Biden is president now, and there is obviously a perception that Julian Assange is the reason that Hillary Clinton is not president right now. No, the reason Hillary Clinton is not president is because the Democratic establishment rigged the primary against Bernie Sanders.
It's because of Susan Sarandon.
Fair enough.
I'm just saying. She's
we
very
can throw
powerful.
Susan in there.
Guys, I just want to say I'm scrolling the Department of Justice line on the bottom of the screen, 202-353-1555. Call up and leave a message. As lengthy as possible. It's a recording. Call up, leave a message, air your grievances, but tell them to drop the case against Julian Assange. And
when we did do our Assange telethon earlier this year, and obviously a shout out to Katie Halper and what she'll be doing tomorrow night with Crystal Ball, Kyle Kulinski, Marianne Williamson.
I was the originator of the Julian Assange telethon.
Jen feels a little slighted.
I do. Not that I wasn't invited to their thing. Not at all. Like I totally want them to have anything that frees Julian Assange. I'm just saying.
As long as they're calling, that is going to be a good thing, because we did actually get one of the operators on the line, and they got pretty pissed off.
Yeah,
like it didn't take.
They
long.
don't. Well, that was with the Senate. That was the Senate line, but the DOJ line is a recording, and I love the idea of filling it up. Pleases me. But I think
again, this all gets back to the power that corporate media still has. I mean, it's not what it used to be. But there was a poll you may have seen recently that shows that one of the biggest problems is the fact that Democratic voters in particular, almost 80% of them agree with corporate media. It's very low with Republicans, and it is slightly higher, but still very low with independents. But Democratic voters have a very soft spot for the MSNBCs and the CNNs of the world. And I think that that's one of our biggest problems right now, is breaking through that force field and them just knee-jerk agreeing with whatever it is that they're saying.
I think the dynamic might be a little more complicated, because a lot of what you see in all media is when you're talking about the op-ed kind, you have the host that is in many ways telling the audience what they I don't want to say what they want to hear, but they're mirroring the audience's views. They're saying, hey, they already know that you're pro-vax, so they're going to do this, and they're going to say it over and over again. And this is something that sometimes it's public service, sometimes it's outreach, sometimes with a lot of topics, it's just reflecting the audience's views.
Echo chamber.
Yeah, and it's more profitable to when you're on a cable news network, it is more profitable to provide your viewers with what they expect, not something new, not you don't want to bring in complicated topics. And that's one of the other things about Julian's case is that that's a complex case with a lot of moving parts. So I think that may have something to do with it, but there is also, when you're talking about particularly the Democratic establishment, the whole concept really probably goes all the way back to FDR and that belief in institutions, and it's probably a holdover from then. But there's a lot of faith that a lot of people in the Democratic Party have in the government, in corporate powers to do the right thing that I don't have, to be honest. But so I don't know that it's that simple, but there's definitely a large, there's an issue that has to be addressed.
I think you bring up an excellent point about where the real divide between the progressives and the libertarians lie. I think there is way too much dependence on government. I know people don't want to hear that, but that is a big problem, and not so much because we shouldn't have services. It's that so much of our services that we have are wasteful.
Oh, yeah.
And then you take it to the other side, which is anybody who's a libertarian is perceived to just be somebody who thinks everything should be privatized and everybody needs to live off the grid. And
everyone should pull themselves up by their bootstraps.
And that's not true. That is not true at all. In fact, I think libertarians and progressives have a lot more in common than they have that they do not agree on. I think issues like civil liberties, issues like the military-industrial complex, issues like even something like healthcare. We emphasize constantly
living wage.
A living wage. Because if you have a living wage, then you're not dependent on the government for subsidies. So this idea that you don't want to have universal health care gets back to the whole corporate media narrative of you just want the government to handle health care. And that's not what it is. It's we are removing the for-profit middlemen in between us and our doctors. The government is simply the single payer funded portion of the actual system. They are not actually providing you service. That is between you and your doctor. And that is a very, forgive me, libertarian way of thinking, because you want to have the least amount of fat attached to any program. And so I think the more we have those conversations with the libertarians and the progressives, I think the more we're going to be able to bridge this divide. It's just a matter of us having these conversations because, Jen was on Tim Pool's show. And while there was a portion of the people on the show who didn't like her.
I got called Karen like 1,000 times.
But there was a hell of a lot more people that agreed with her than didn't. And that to me says, if you can go on Tim Pool's show, who is definitely, a combination of progressive and libertarian, but his audience is definitely libertarian right. And you've got that group saying, you know what, that's
it's a bigger audience. I'll go on.
How did you end up on Tim Pool's show? I'm dying to hear this story.
We went to his compound. We went to his place, and they actually offered for us to stay there. But at the time when we said, I'm like, I don't know what this is. For all I know, this is like some basement somewhere. I'm not going to say yeah. Turns out it would have been fine to stay there. It's really nice. His people were great. Like they're just he basically has. You would actually appreciate this. They're like an off the grid situation. He's got like a ton of acres and they have people, and it's like a commune situation there. He's got a couple of skateboard parks and they're pretty just doing their own thing.
But the big difference between somebody like Tim Pool and somebody like Beau is that Tim knows where his bread is buttered.
But for me, it was a matter of that's a whole new audience. My message is my message. It doesn't really matter what I go on. Like I'm not changing my message. So if I'm going to reach a whole different audience talking about single payer healthcare and talking about things, I'll go anywhere. Like that's fine with me.
I would love to see you and Tim have a conversation.
Oh, that would be so. Except, but no, I don't see it.
I don't know about that.
I don't see it.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't. I don't have a lot of warm fuzzy feelings, but I mean, I don't know the guy.
No, and the thing is that I also think a lot of that to some extent is almost like WWF, because when you meet people, it's a show to him. It is. It's a show. I'm not saying he's saying things
Oh,
that he doesn't believe.
I have no doubt that he completely understands. He probably views himself more as an entertainer that provides information.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and so there is a certain amount of that for sure. And I don't think he's not somebody who ever holds himself out to be like a journalist or anything like that. So
But do you agree that there really is a potential, I don't want to say come to Jesus moment, but there really is the potential for a growing alliance between progressives and libertarians, especially on the labor front?
Well, that is the labor front. That is the unifying factor between people.
the main issue that you're going to run into with libertarians when it comes to the labor side of things, a lot of them are going to be all about it from the contract standpoint of, yeah, you have the ability to engage in collective bargaining because it's your right, it's your labor, you get to sell it. I don't know how much support you're going to get from a lot of libertarians because many of them believe that one day they're going to be on top. So I'm not sure. I think there's a lot of room there for social progressive causes. I see that. Labor, I'm not so sure because a lot of them are, they're Atlas shrugging. That's who they are. So I mean, I'm also one of those people, anything's worth trying. So, I mean, it's worth a shot.
Well, it's kind of like, when we're talking about libertarians, they're not necessarily all like pro-capitalist, right? Like, I mean, there's people that are not necessarily, heartless in that mix. But I mean, I agree. I mean, we generally do agree on civil liberties issues is the huge one. And also on military. That's a big thing. They don't want to be involved in wars and having the Pentagon spending thousands of dollars for toilets and whatever kind of nonsense that they're doing. That's waste. You can appeal to people based on waste. Like, I feel like you can appeal to most people when you explain to them, this makes more sense for all of us, and this is why. I think that that's just something people are receptive to.
Yeah. I think it is. I mean, there are you can find common ground with anybody. The question then becomes, are you going to be able to move them on other issues? There are a lot of libertarians that over the years have moved from, big L Libertarian Party to becoming left libertarian, more that word I never say online, which is, I mean, that to me is a good move. That's something that is going to have long-term benefits. So there is the ability to move them. I don't know if you're going to move them from the Libertarian Party to the Bernie Sanders side of things. But I mean, I'm a huge supporter of diversity of tactics. So I definitely think it's worth a shot.
And I always love that one of the big things you always promote is like local community engagement and participation and knowing your neighbors. That's how you build your team. That's why the people in the rural areas will survive the apocalypse and we will not, because we don't even know our neighbors. That's why.
Right.
One thing we'll say about Tim Pool, he is definitely ready for the rapture.
Oh, that place is a compound.
He's got it all. He's got the bomb shelter. He's got the food.
Crazy.
So he'll be fine. And so,
but in all fairness, he bought this place had that. It's not like he's a doomsdayer that did it. Let's put that. I don't want that getting out there. They were saying Tim Pool's preparing for. No, it came with actually. Because I did say that. I'm like, this is really. He's like, yeah, it had it. I'm like, all right.
A lot of people are getting to the point now where they really don't think that electoral politics is the answer, or at the bare minimum, it is not the only answer. And I never thought it was. I think that it definitely plays a role for sure. I think cases like Jen versus Wasserman Schultz are clear. And I think even, cases against Matt Gaetz are clear. And even though I think Rebecca Jones is a good candidate, and she will be on our podcast next week, if you're running as a Democrat in a district like that, you're wasting your time. You just are. It's not a question of you being a good candidate. It's just a question of recognizing the infrastructure and and what you are capable of doing.
How do you know, Beau, can a Democrat win in your district?
Against Gaetz?
Just in general, do you think that a Democrat could win up there?
I mean, it would be hard. It would have to be a perfect storm.
Right.
With everything that's going on with Gaetz, maybe it depends on when the news breaks.
and listen, I think Rebecca's a good candidate. I think she actually has a certain appeal to her. I think she's got good name recognition in lieu of everything she went through with the governor. And you're talking about one of those circumstances that usually it's just the way it is in politics, where if it is a scandal-ridden representative, it can be taken out. And his type of scandal is the type of scandal that gets kicked out of politics.
He's right. Like he's being charged as he's like a pederast, right?
Yeah.
That's a problem.
And well, here's the thing. He potentially committed federal crimes crossing state lines with a minor. And if you do that, especially in a state like Florida,
that's trafficking.
That's a big problem.
That's trafficking.
And so now the question will become, are they going to get him? But I'm always of the mind that one of the reasons why they never seem to go down is because so many of them have these skeletons in their closets and they're always protecting each other. They always know that there's almost like this, if I go, you're all coming with me. I am not taking the fall for this. And that, I think, is what ultimately ends up happening in many instances. Is they're just like, okay, we all understand what the deal is.
I think that a lot of times they just can't prove their case. That's what I think. But if he's being indicted by federal charges, then he's going to be toast, because they don't play games. If the feds, if they have a case against you, they're winning it. They're like at a 98% rate. Like they're not in the same league as the state people.
Hey, listen, if the GOP is smart, maybe they feel that they have to primary him. I mean, if you primary Gaetz and you have another GOPer there, then again, it probably doesn't matter who's on the other side. It's a red area. And again, we're looking at it from the perspective of, we had Andrew Yang on the podcast recently. Obviously, we like the idea of what he's trying to do. It's all about whether or not you take that corporate special interest money. He says he's not. But I think, like you said, you're of the mind that we have to have multiple ideas on the table. There is no silver bullet to solving our problems. But the question becomes, what does the inside-outside strategy look like? I think the outside strategy, as we've talked about, is definitely a labor movement. That, to me, I think, is the silver bullet on the outside.
And community. I mean, look, the community networks and doing things at the local level, that is getting stuff done.
Community gardens.
Well, all of it that your elected people will never do for you. And that's the thing. Like, even if electoral politics was working really well, that you still need to have that. But in terms of the advocacy, like that's where I think we need to see a better merging of the inside and outside people and not fighting against each other.
I agree. And now you look at how this particular administration is governing and all the problems that exist. Where do you see things going as far as, I mean, we've seen nihilism even before the Biden administration began that was reaching a fever pitch. Now it's probably unbelievably over the top. Trying to convince people to stay involved
and vote.
I'm thinking that that's going to be a very tough, nut to crack going forward. How do you see that unfolding?
Yeah, before the election, even I said that one of my big fears was Biden gets elected, and then people think everything's solved. In this case, I think it turned more into people think everything's pointless. And they're going to kind of fade out of being politically active in any way. That's a real risk for a bunch of reasons, because Trumpism isn't gone, so that's still out there. And unless there is a drastic shift in the velocity at which they are getting stuff done, the Democratic Party is going to have a really hard time in the next election. So I think that's a large risk. And I'm not sure that nihilism is even the right word. I think it's that they may become completely disaffected, not to where they don't still want those things. It's not that they don't go and they don't surrender their beliefs and just say whatever. They just say they don't have the power to do it. They can't get it done. I don't know that it's practically at the end of the day, I don't know that that's a big difference when you're talking about the effectiveness, but I think it's easier to empower people than to get them to care. So maybe it's just me being optimistic.
Yeah. And look, there's no shortage of things that people do on both sides of the political spectrum to suppress voters and to make things harder for people to be involved. And you see all these scandals, all these problems. That doesn't help. The fact that we can't really trust our process so well. And I'm not talking about what went down with Trump, but I mean, just in general, like our process is so fixed in so many ways. We see it here at a local level that's crazy off the charts, but just all of it. And I can see why people feel somewhat defeatist about participating in electoral politics, because you might care about things, but when you feel like, first of all, what's one vote anyway? And then, and on top of that, and my vote may or may not even be counted. It really, I get it. Like, I get it. It's very defeatist feeling. And that's why we always encourage, if you feel that way, get involved in an outside strategy. Go join the Sunrise Movement. Go do, like, there's no shortage of ways for people to help and get involved. I mean, we encourage voting, but even if you're defeatist about the electoral process, there's a lot of things that people can do. That's, I think, the best, way to go about it.
Right. To me, voting has always, it's been more defensive. It's never been a tool I saw as something that was in and of itself going to create real change. It's something to hold the line while you're changing people's minds doing something else. So I would suggest labor movements, community networking. These are things that can cross lines, and these are things that can shift people's views on large issues. I think conservation is another one that is left out in the open. I've had a lot of success reaching out to the people around me using that route. And it's so frustrating to me on some levels, because these are people who have union jobs and go to the co-op and rail about leftism. I'm like, you do understand that, like, your entire life is based around economic, leftist economic principles, right? But you can't say that. You can't say it to them that way. You have to bring,
You didn't explain to them that, that your entire setup of how you are is basically like based on Marxist principles and, communism, basically, in a sense of work and socialism. Like they don't get that.
No, those are not words that I use in those conversations.
I know.
There's this whole thing with a tractor recently, and anyway.
Yeah, fastest way to lose friends and alienate people. That's
but it's true. No, it's true. But I think that's what's important, is how you message the same thing. You could take the same thing and you message it in two different ways, or several different ways. And that's how you get people to understand.
That's the art of it. It's no different than protecting our constitutional rights, especially our First Amendment, and not having to say the name Julian Assange. Because I guarantee you that most people, if they really knew the crux of the story and what actually transpired and why it's important, most would say, yeah, I agree with that.
Right.
Leave his name out.
But they're not, well, that's why the media doesn't tell the whole story. They don't tell the right story. We'll be getting into that we have a bootlicker today, guys. So we have a very good bootlicker today.
Yeah. And again, I think that the whole thing about, we do an occasional bootlicker of the week. That's
well, I'm not calling, we're changing it though. And Beau's here for he'll be at the premiere show of this, because we used to do a bootlicker of the week, but now it's not weekly. And so now I have what I'm calling a bootlicker alert. And so I have changed it. So it'll happen sporadically, but we have ourselves a bootlicker today, people. So.
And I think, again, this is all about, what can we do going forward that is going to allow us to build as cohesive of a movement as possible? We're kind of, we're on like a rocky boat right now, and it's kind of hard to, keep everybody together. And right now, it's not like we see the iceberg. It's like we've hit the iceberg. You have lifeboats and we're being offered to get off. And yet you've got a lot of people who are just like, no, I'll stay on the ship.
I'm one of the, I feel like I'm one of the musicians. I'm the guy with the violin.
I keep telling you, the violin is different. That person was resigned to his fate.
You can think of it your way. I'll think of it my way. You're the guy who falls down the center into the propeller. I'm the violinist.
I'm the guy who falls down and my body goes spiraling after I hit the propeller. God, nobody forgets that guy. Do you find? Do you do? Again, we try to do as much crossover. Connections as we can. I think that is very important.
This pleases me. Look at this.
What's that?
Hi, Michael. Michael says, hey, Jen, I loved your Florida campaign. I made a number of changes to mine based upon some of the ideas and tips you shared with Marianne Williamson. Yes, shout out to Marianne as well. We love that. Marianne will pop in every once in a while in the chat. But good. I'm glad to hear that. Hopefully you're, making your campaign a service campaign. I think that's the key thing. And keep it going. Even if you don't win, keep your group going. We have to use the campaigns as forward momentum. They cannot just be a means to an end. We need to keep our thing going. And
I think that's a great segue in terms of winding down the conversation, because one of the things that is really important here in Florida, as you know, Beau, is we are a very libertarian red type state in many ways, but we get really solid ballot initiatives in Florida. And that unites a lot of people. We've got 2 of them potentially next year, despite the fact it looks like it's going to be a DeSantis sweep, if you will. If we could get ranked choice voting, and if we could get full decriminalization of cannabis, I think it maybe, is it legalization?
It's legalization.
Legalization with home grow. If we're able to pass those 2 ballot initiatives, those are major wins as far as I can see. How do you see it?
I can see it being as a major win for the majority of Florida. Where I live, one of those policies is de facto in place, really, for most people. I mean, it
doesn't change.
They have more important things to worry about. They're not looking.
Right. But what it does do is it rallies young people out to vote. And that is something, when you get good ballot initiatives out there, that does change the demographics of people that might be willing to come out and vote if it's something that's important to them. And the young people care about the weed. But I will say this is the first one that has allowed for home grow that I think has a chance of going through. And I think it allows for 9 plants per adult, which is actually really good. And I'm not growing my own. I will always subcontract that out to others. That's why we pay our farmers, and that's, everybody needs to do their share. I prefer to pay the premium for a farmer, but I want the opportunity to grow it if I could. That's how I feel. I don't grow my own food either, but I would like that. I like that I can if I want to.
Community gardens.
Yeah, no, I like to support other people doing that.
It's funny. I think I'm probably one of the only people in my area that doesn't smoke and doesn't have a crop of some kind somewhere.
Like of anything. And I know you live on a big property, right? You don't grow, you don't have.
I was specifically talking about cannabis.
Oh, cannabis. So what do you grow? I'm imagining that you're probably like an off the grid person.
Well, right now we're putting in a new orchard, but we have apples, we have grapevines, banana trees, the little baby oranges, loquat, kumquat, pears, peaches. And
I picture your house as sort of like, I don't know, like, do you homeschool? Like, are your kids homeschooled?
We did for a year or so. Not right now. So.
Okay, because I can almost picture you have like your whole own little thing going there. And I'm thinking, if there's an apocalypse, that's where I'm going. And friends of mine down here actually bought some acreage up in Baconton, Georgia. and which I know is probably not that far off. And what's interesting is they're growing the same things. Like a lot of what you're talking about is what they're growing there, and they have grapes and all this stuff. And I'm very much looking forward to going up and participating in a harvest. I've never harvested, really, not anywhere, like not an orchard.
Well, maybe that is the next evolution for a lot of people. Not saying they have to grow a beard as big as yours, but maybe they have to learn how to be self-reliant and resourceful.
This is a huge problem. And this is a huge problem. And it is definitely much more of
blue Democrat. Oh, yeah.
Elitist, liberal thing. Like, honestly, I know more people in our area that can't change tires than can.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And it's like, when I think of that, we don't teach our kids that. We don't, like, we'll teach them all sorts of like linear equations and all shit, but they don't know how to change tires.
Beau, I know people who don't know how to cook. Like they literally do not know how to cook.
How is this possible?
It is.
You put shit in a pan.
You just demonetized our show. Great job, kid.
Our show would get demonetized anyway.
Great job.
Yeah.
But that to me, even the basics, we've become, and this is, I guess, the effect of, I always say technology is our greatest asset and it's our greatest detriment at the same time. And when you have things that are at your fingertips where you can just order in, why is there so much investment on TV and Uber Eats, for example? It's because we've learned what society has become. We are an extremely dependent society. And I think that's one of the reasons why
don't say we, he's not, we are.
The general consensus of people who live in urban areas.
Oh yeah, we can't do anything for ourselves.
That they're not capable of taking care of themselves.
No.
And I think
we're actually, and this is going to be fun. Next spring, so we have a little corner of the property that we're basically building walls to show people how they can grow food in an apartment. We're going to do container growing and so it'll basically be like balconies, show how to do all of it in a confined space. And I honestly can't wait to do it. I mean, I'm certain that at some point, because it always happens, something's just going to completely go bad. But a crop's going to go or fail or whatever. But I think that the process of learning how to do it and seeing it, rather than seeing it, like when people show vertical gardening, they tend to do it in an area where there's also raised beds and crops in the ground and all of this stuff around it. And people tend to get the idea, well, they just have it right. A lot of this stuff can be done anywhere. And we're going to try to focus on table foods. Like we're going to show how to grow potatoes in a bag and stuff like that. Yeah. So it should be fun.
I think that's great. So I was thinking we should do like a road trip over the summer and go show up at different strikes and participate, like do like around the country, like do strikes, and we could do like take our show on the road. But I'd love to also go to like different community garden things that people are doing. One of the things that we did here that we had going really well with a group was a really good community garden, but then that got gentrified. And unfortunately, it's not a thing anymore. But we now have a new location. We will be at a public high school, guys. If you're local, we're going to be at Hallandale High School. We'll be hosting a community garden. So we're going to get to do that. But one of the key things was all about the education, like setting it up. One of the things we talked about doing was setting up different types of irrigation systems to be able to show you could do this for this much money, or you could do this for free, or you could use a hose and do, like just different things so people can see how easy certain parts of this are. I think that's so important. People don't realize how easy some of it is.
I think Ella hit it right on the head. We absolutely do need to be teaching the basics. And that, again, is a failure of our education system, because so much of the stuff we learn in school is not relevant to the real world.
I'm all about barter and trade. Yeah. All about barter. Beau, where you live, I'm sure that's a thing, right?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, yeah. We definitely have a plan to turn some of our product from our horses into fertilizer and trade that, because we wound up with another horse, so now it's going to be like 150 pounds of that stuff a day. So
that's good fertilizer.
I would send it to like the White House or something. I remember what was that? Do you remember Murphy Brown when they did the whole thing with the potatoes on the White House lawn with Dan Quayle? And no, I'm so old. Never mind.
Yeah, you are.
I remember Murphy Brown. I do not remember that.
So
episode.
She had an ongoing feud all the time. And at the time, it was with Dan Quayle, because that's who was there. And we, up until W, he was as dumb as it got. I mean, I didn't know we could go much lower than that. We've reached the whole point. Okay, so Dan Quayle, and he did this thing where he said something about potato. It was the word potatoes, and he's like, you got to add the E. Like it was a potato with an E. And so Murphy Brown had like dump trucks of potatoes sent over and dumped all the potatoes on the White House lawn. I think that would be, there's a lot of good places for manure was my point. I can think of a lot of good places.
And I really think that this is the importance more than anything else in terms of having this conversation, because we are in a completely different world compared to the world that you live in. But I think people really need to understand that we are a lot more alike than we are different. I think it should be celebrated being able to be self-sustained, to be able to take care of yourself, to be able to be resourceful and get these things done. And that's the benefit of decentralized planning, which is something that we really do emphasize. And that is much more of a Republican conservative thing than it is a liberal thing. But I think it's the only way we're going to save ourselves, because we really are in a desperate time right now. And I do think one of the reasons why, correct me if I'm wrong, Beau, but I think one of the reasons why we don't see the masses, if you will, in the streets is because of a lack of self-sustainability. I think the dependency of so many people, the fear of what might happen in terms of their job, in terms of, getting out and about and doing what is necessary, health care.
People can't leave their jobs. How else would they get health care?
I think that is a huge factor in whether or not we are allowing ourselves to build these types of movements outside of electoral politics that is going to allow us to get to where we need to go. And so with our audience seeing you and hearing you and how things are in the parts of the country that doesn't get focused on, but if that could become more of the norm, the more self-sustainable, like you said, teaching people how to grow fruits and vegetables in an apartment type setting, that is immensely important. And it gives you a sense of meaning in a way that a lot of things don't. When you do it yourself, it's really, again, building a table. Silly as that is, but that for a lot of people is not something they normally do.
I put in the floors in the studio.
She did. Give Jen credit. She's very, I keep telling her she make a hell of an interior designer.
I'm not very handy. I can occasionally do things.
But I think you would agree that there is something to be said for the urban centers of this country and the lack of self-sustainability as one of the reasons for our lethargic disposition about a lot of things that are going on. I think that that's a big part of it, and would love to hear in closing thoughts if you think that that is a big part of it as well.
I definitely think that it's, the way capitalism in general is structured is that you have that as the stick. The carrot is, if you work well, you play by the rules, you're going to lead a pretty comfortable life. The stick is, if you don't, you're going to be out in the street, no health insurance, nothing, you're done. And the ability to be self-sustaining is something that can, shorten the stick. It gives them less to hit you with. One of the things you mentioned, going and talking to the different strikes, one of the things that just blew my mind, in fact, we have this whole, actually turned into a video, and it's like an actual production thing. When we went up to the miners' strike, walking into that union hall, they had it completely transformed from what it would normally look like. And it looked exactly like the depots we have after hurricanes. Completely organized. People could go in, pick up a bag of groceries. It's already pre-packed, school supplies, everything that people needed. That kind of organization, if you have that, you can weather a storm. They've been on strike 8, maybe 9 months now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was saying before. That's a different thing amongst miners that you're not going to get amongst the more rotating. You have a lot more transient people, I think, in other industries that don't allow for that kind of network, that kind of thing with the miners. But it's still really important, guys. And they're doing a job that is just so, to me, scary and unsafe and risky, and health issues. And also, I have to plug, if you haven't seen on Hulu, Dope Sick. I just watched it. It's really amazing, but it really has to do with how we treat our miners. That was one of the things about, like, in the mining communities and how we treat them. And it's it's shameful.
If there is any reason specifically why getting off of fossil fuels, particularly natural gas and coal, is so vital, is because it's of the health of regular people. This goes without saying that, you know, we are getting to a breaking point, and something has to be done. Beau, we can't thank you enough. Obviously, when we started this podcast shortly after Jen's campaign, you know, we didn't know what to expect, and you were right there to give her a hand, and that really made a huge difference right off the bat.
Because he knows I'm one of his OGs, because I've been around since back in the olden days. Oh, and before you go, I have to tell you this. So you have, and I love the myriad of t-shirts. If you don't know Beau, you have to watch Beau, because there's always a different t-shirt. The only thing is, sometimes based on where the workbench is, you can't always see the bottom part of the t-shirt, but he always has a cool different t-shirt on. But one of your t-shirts.
How about the shirt he's wearing right now?
Yeah, no.
And I like to compost.
This is
I like to compost.
Okay, so Beau has this t-shirt that my husband had and would still have again, but it got a stain on it and I got rid of it. I'm sure he'll find it again. And when he bought this particular shirt, I looked at it and I said, nobody is going to understand that shirt. Nobody will understand that shirt, what that shirt means. And he's like, are you kidding me? It makes perfect sense. So it's learning is half, or knowledge is half the battle.
G.I. Joe. Yeah, come on.
Yes. Yeah. So the t-shirt that Beau has, that Jason had, where it's a pie chart. It's a pie chart, and and half of it is knowing, right? It's knowing is half the battle. Is that what it is?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that takes up. And when I saw you wearing that shirt, and my husband saw it, he's like, see, Beau understands. He sees that shirt. He's got it. When he bought that, I'm like, nobody will understand that. And yet you have that t-shirt. And so on behalf of my husband, I had to say, give me props for that, because he was very impressed.
Beau of the Fifth Column on YouTube.
Thank you so much for coming
I'm
back.
sure
Always.
Many of you are familiar with the show. For those of you who are not, please check them out.
Yes, seriously.
If you are looking for,
it's the best.
If you're looking for the perspective that you need to hear from the rural part of this country.
And you even made a comment tonight where I was about to say, see, that was very Mr. Rogers thing to say. It was a very Mr. Rogers thing to say.
Okay, well, if you ever wanted a Mr. Rogers with a ZZ Top beard, then you have your person right here. Beau of the Fifth Column, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon. Have a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
You too. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, brother.
That's so funny. Happy Festivus.
And I'm not even going to wait. So for those of you who are new and like our content and appreciate what we're doing
before you go, hit the like button.
Hit the like button, subscribe, patreon.com/generational change.
We're going to do our bootlicker, so that could be fun for you. We do have a bootlicker alert, and I did change the graphic for it. So we have a bootlicker.
Do you not want to at least let people know that they can get involved with our show?
Well, why you could do that? You put it up there.
For as low as $5 a month, you can help support our channel as we are delivering non-corporate content on the daily. But we are a show that pulls no punches. We will tackle any topic, and we know that it hurts our show's growth. We know that.
And guys, we have good guests.
We do.
We really do. Check out our library. We have good guests. It's free to subscribe. However, if you would like to be a Patreon,
that would be huge.
It would be huge.
We have Patreons, as you can see, of the $5 variety, and they are plenty. And they are awesome supporters of the show. What do supporters who are the $10
and I owe a couple of you shirts. My bad. I did move, and I have some stuff in boxes. And Mallory, I'm gonna see her in person and give her a shirt. But anyway, so yeah, $10 donors get a T-shirt, and $5 donors actually do get a bracelet. And I have one that I have to send out. But so we do have some fun merch, guys. But really, the key thing is with your money, when you're a subscriber or a member, you're supporting our efforts and mostly what we do locally. And we do things like spend money. For example, I just donated from our organization, just donated $100 to Probation Station. And they put together every year for Christmas, they put together hygiene bags for the incarcerated youth. So these are kids that are in facilities that have not had the best life, basically. And probation station.
Let's be very clear. We do not take a salary from any of the
No.
This
So
is all for community efforts.
I give it to different organizations. It's very local. Occasionally, non-corporate candidates, we do support that. That's why we cannot be a 501c3.
Correct.
But yeah, probation station's doing. She does toiletry kits every Christmas because that's what these kids want. They want like shampoo and shaving cream, and she gets them all set up and gives them little bags, and so we just donated to that. So that's the kind of stuff we do. I have homeless packs that we give out. I mean, just whatever we can do to help. We just donated $200 to help the community garden at Hallandale High School that's starting up. So when you support our show, that's the kind of stuff that we're doing with the money.
We are very grateful for all of you who are still here. Our final subject of the night, our final topic of the night will, of course, be, as we have talked about earlier, Julian Assange. And no one was a bigger douche canoe addressing this issue than Joe Scarborough, or Joe Sourdough.
So Joe, I don't even, you know what? Is he? Where did he come from? Like, I've never watched their show.
Well, of course,
Joe. I don't watch their show.
It's funny you should ask, because Joe is from the Panhandle of Florida, and he was a congressional representative in Florida's 2nd District a number of moons ago.
This douche went on not only just a very gratuitous rant, I think, about Julian Assange, like basically just doing it for the sake of doing it, but it was based on false things. He literally was saying false things, like inaccurate things, what he was claiming about what Julian Assange was doing. He actually made a comment that Julian Assange was trying to get information by like hacking into into our government system. No, that was Chelsea Manning. She didn't hack, she leaked. And Julian Assange is a publisher, and that information is factual. And the fact that you, douchebag Joe Sourdough, do not see that going after someone like Assange is really going after all media and all First Amendment, it is because you, Joe, are a douche.
And again, can't say enough. And it's not that he wasn't without his, he was too helpful to Trump or he was cozying up to the Russians. Yes, Mehdi Hasan is going to walk the corporate line, but to his credit, he did say Julian Assange should be free. And the fact that somebody on MSNBC with a regular show said that Julian Assange should be free, that's going to make things very uncomfortable at the holiday party this week when Joe Scarborough has to walk in Mehdi's presence. And two, it at least shows you that maybe journalism isn't dead, but it's at death's door.
And first of all, this is not a journalist. This is a hack.
Correct.
But I can't even, but this, I've never even watched this guy's show, so I don't know. But I did see a clip of his thing about Assange, and it wasn't just that it was inaccurate. It was like, what was the point of it? What was the point of that other than licking the boots of your corporate donors, your sponsors, your people? And so that for him would be ultimately,
and
I
not
guess,
only that,
Comcast. That's ultimately who he's a whore to.
And they are still addressing Julian Assange's extradition in the context of he cost the election for Hillary Clinton. First of all, as I said before, Hillary Clinton cost the election for herself when they rigged the primary against Bernie Sanders.
And also because she's a horrible candidate and nobody likes her.
And if you are going to rig a primary, don't expect people to vote for you in the general. And that is what happened. And not only did that happen, but a lot of them voted for Trump out of spite.
And here's the thing, get the pitchforks. I agree. I don't care what I personally do. Like agree with what Assange did. Like I think he's a hero.
You don't have to like him.
But that's not the point. You're
exactly.
Right. That's not the point.
Exactly.
The fact that this person does not see the link between his existence and what Julian Assange did, that is a testament to our faulty education system in this country. And this is what I say about people like Lauren Boebert. These are people that we should revere, in a sense, as using them as like poster children for our completely defunct education system in this country.
100%.
This person,
Marjorie Taylor Greene, would be a great example of that.
These are people that we should put up seriously on posters and say, this is what our education system leads to. Granted, we're already the laughing stock of a good portion of the world, but like these people are why we can see that we have an education problem in this country.
And
he's a problem.
And not only that, but can we please talk about what a hack Claire McCaskill is.
Okay. She to me is,
God.
it's funny. I saw somebody put that something about her and Hillary, and I said to you, she to me is Hillary Clinton.
She sounds like Hillary. It's really disturbing.
She would be in the, if we were doing a story time, she would definitely be in the Les Miserables Crohn's book.
But what's even
She
more
is a
interesting
miserable
is
crone.
that I don't know the name of the company. Forgive me for not remembering this, guys. And if anybody in the chat knows, Claire McCaskill works for like a multinational corporation now. And what she says is total corporate special interest talking points when she goes on TV.
Of course.
And when anybody talks about how is Josh Hawley a U.S. senator, it's because of Claire McCaskill. That is why he is a U.S. senator. Not because people are dumb. It's because you have representation like Claire McCaskill.
Well, and what happened to her is the same thing as like what happened to like Donna Shalala or any of the people down here. They didn't lose because they're Democrats. They lost because they suck.
Yeah.
And what I find funny is when they bring on Claire McCaskill, they had her on like during the election, during the campaigns and stuff to like talk about strategy. Don't ask her, because if she knew, she would still be sitting in her office. Now she's just making more money.
And the one thing you could say about MSNBC more than the two other networks, Fox News and CNN, MSNBC really has a problem with bringing on losers. They really like to get the opinion of people who lose.
Maybe that's just all they can get.
Well, you know. What I did find interesting, though,
I'm sure they'll have bet on my stork on when he loses.
On the GOP side, let's be fair, I do love the fact that Chris Christie, who was my governor, and I admit I voted for him in 2009, the fact that his book sold like 2,000 copies total, that's kind of sweet. Is
that one of those warm, fuzzy feelings for you?
Well, what ends up happening in the book business, for those of you who don't know, is that if you write a book and a major publisher takes it on and it completely bombs, that's the last time you're ever going to
get they'll never. Well, yeah, you'll have to self-publish if you want to do something else.
Mm-hmm. So, in a way, capitalism does work in the book in the book industry.
Speaking of the book industry, doesn't what's his face now have to pay back the money that he got from his book?
You know, we didn't do a news and amuse, and there were a lot of things that we could have covered tonight.
Yeah, that's
we obviously addressed with David Sirota what Nancy Pelosi did and how that's just emblematic of late stage capitalism. But every once in a while, and I always say
there is a nugget of fun out there.
There's a lot of issues. Look, we have a lot of issues with New York. I think it's overregulated, but New York definitely has a progressive bend. And the fact that they are going after Governor Cuomo to have to pay back my $5 million in blood money.
I love that he has to pay back the book money.
He's got to pay back. How about
Oh my God.
And yeah, I bet you he's already spent like
the demise of the Cuomo brothers has been so entertaining for me on so many levels.
But why don't you like me, Andrew Cuomo?
Because you're thugs. Because you're a bully.
Why don't you
I don't like bullies.
Why don't you go pick on Fredo?
And I do. I pick on Fredo too because he's also a bully, and I don't like bullies. I just don't. I don't think I that's just not something I find appealing.
What is the appeal? What is the appeal of the Cuomos? I don't know.
The only thing I can figure is I really have a feeling that their mom can probably really cook.
Oh, well.
And that's the only thing I can think of that's redeeming.
Dinner.
Yeah. See, that does sound really good to me. And I dated for a period of time Italian man from the Albany area. So I can speak as to the Italian situation in the Albany area. And I know they're not necessarily from that area, but I got to tell you, the sauce rocks. She would wake up Sunday morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. She had to be up because she had to start the gravy. That's how you start the Sunday sauce, the Sunday gravy.
Well,
before Mass.
Sundays in Italian families, that's a serious business.
You start the sauce. And this is, I'm a Jewish girl from North Miami Beach. I remember going up to visit.
Yeah, but have you ever seen Goodfellas?
You start the sauce. You wake up Sunday morning to smell the sauce, which is like the best thing ever. And then you go to Mass, and then you come home, and then
that is chef's kiss, baby.
Yeah.
So, as you guys know, and this is, of course, where we always conclude, we always talk about the positive side of things. And that, of course, is,
I don't think we always talk about the positive. Today we talked about basically the end of the world.
But the one of the silver linings we do have is the labor movement, which is growing. And of course, we know where the issues in the labor movement lie, but not for a lack of trying amongst the rank and file. Lots of good things are happening. Remember, Max Alvarez of Real News, he is hosting a fundraiser.
is there a link? Or is it just Real News Network? Is it
Real News Network? I don't know what the link is.
He's doing a fundraiser
for the Kellogg's striking workers.
Yeah, guys, donate to that. Those are exactly the kind of workers that don't necessarily have the same kind of community network that the miners have.
But somebody wants to come and
oh, for God's sake. Here he goes.
Well, look, I just wanted everybody to know and to understand that I am going to Michigan on Friday. We are going to do a major rally for the Kellogg's workers. We're going to raise the money, and we are going to demand that Kellogg's gives a fair union contract.
Say hi to Rashida.
Hi, Rashida. We really are appreciative of everything that you do. You're doing a wonderful job in Detroit. And of course, I am going to come there, and we're going to make a big difference. That is what it's about.
Okay.
The unions are the lifeblood of the labor movement.
I know. I'm really thinking that what I should do for a month this summer is, and I would basically do anything to be on the road and travel around, but I really think we could do like a series and go to different and do like a labor series and just show up and support different and do other things along the way. But not in any way to discredit what Jordan Sheraton, our friend Jordan Sheraton with Status Quo, is really on the front lines with that.
I appreciate Jordan. I think he does a wonderful job. He covers the great stories. He did a great job on Flint. And when I go there, I'm going to talk about the fact that we really need a Build Back Better agenda. So that way we have enough money to fix the pipes.
They still don't have clean water in Flint. And not only do they not have clean water in Flint, but how come nobody on the national level is speaking out against this total corruption scandal that went down there?
Well, if I was president of the United States, and I should have been, I would have made fixing the pipes in Flint one of my priorities in the first 100 days. Unfortunately, my good friend Joe, and he's a good friend.
He shouldn't be your friend. He could have eliminated student debt.
Well, look, I tried to ask him to come with me to Michigan on Friday. He's not going to come.
I don't think he can make the trip.
Well, you keep that to yourself, okay? He's still my friend. I still think that the American people can be united around labor, and that is what we are going to do on Friday. So you make sure that you check out the fundraiser with the Real News, and it's going to be for the Kellogg's striking workers.
Okay, and then there's also a Julian Assange live stream that's going to be happening. Katie Halper is hosting.
On that note, I have to go.
Exactly.
I can't say
that's a good way to get rid of anybody elected. Michael, 24, Michael. It's strategy and timing is a very important factor, and districts are different, and we don't even know what our district line is right now. And it's just, I think we just have some thoughts on the best way to handle this. And 22 is going to be a major ass whooping that the Democrats have not seen the likes of in so many years.
Yeah,
this is going to
be like 94 and 2010.
And something I realized when we were talking to Beau that I thought was kind of interesting was that it really made me think back when you said you had voted for Chris Christie, and I think about like the bad things that people, bad votes, bad choices. And it reminded me that the only election in my entire life, really adult life, that I did not volunteer on, help with, participate in, presidential election, the only one really was Obama in 2012. And that to me, I basically went dormant from that. I was always very active, always very involved, always. And then that was it. I was like, you know what? This is just not worth fighting for. And then I did it. And then so I basically was on sabbatical for 4 years. Because when you said everybody woke up in 16, I'm like, well, no, I didn't like wake up in 16. I was always awake. I hibernated from 2012 to 2016.
There's a lot of people who think Christie would have won in 2012 if he had run. And I actually could see, you can make.
I don't know.
For that.
I don't know. He's too fat. He's too fat.
Talk about really hitting it between the eyes.
I'm sorry, but it's you know what? It's one of those things that we just know that we have to just face as people. There's a reason.
There's no more William Howard Taft's getting elected to the White House.
No, we've done studies of this. People know this. Tall people, attractive people, thin people, like fit people, they do better in things. People look more approachable to them. It is a fact. It's not me disliking people because of their weight. It's me saying that in the world of politics, that if you look at people, look at governors, look at people, look at them. How many of them in Congress, how many people are obese?
There is an image.
How many?
There's an image of Christie playing in a charity softball game at Yankee Stadium. And the way that you just can't. You just have to see the image.
I'm just saying, if somebody who is currently in elected office at that level, at a statewide level or at a federal, that is obese like that, I can't think
Well,
of
he's not
anybody.
elected anymore, so it
Well,
doesn't
okay,
matter.
but that's what I'm saying. So that's why when I look at someone like that, I'm like, that is not somebody who can win a national office. I'm sorry, you just can't.
Last thing before we go, guys, also very important. Tomorrow night on Katie Halper's show, I believe is who's hosting it. Now they did a phenomenal job with Stephen Donziger from this previous week. Returning with Katie will be Marianne Williamson, Crystal Ball, and filling in for Brianna Joy Gray will be Kyle Kalinske.
So guys, that's a big thing. I mean, that's a big deal. So check it out. Anything to support. I don't know what their ask is, like what they're pushing, like for people to do, whether it's call or do whatever, but definitely check out.
Well,
Katie's
in case they
live
haven't put it up, but we will put it up again.
Yes, guys, call the Department of Justice.
And that should be the big one. Because
I mean, yes, if
Mr. Garland, it's time.
Drop the case. But if you are someone who can contact your representative or your senator, by all means do that. I highly recommend it. Ours won't respond. So ours, there's no point there. But I do like the idea of filling up the DOJ comment line with just free Assange, free Assange. They're at this point, to me, I just look at them and it's like, they're just trying to kill him. They're just slowly torturing and killing him without due process, mind you, which, by the way, I don't care what it is. The fact that it's the Espionage Act and that's an outrage. The fact that he's a journalist and that's an outrage. All of these things are atrocious. But this is somebody who has been incarcerated for like 12 years without due process. And yes, I know that's happening in Guantanamo Bay and all sorts of places, opposed to it there too. But Julian Assange being extradited here is the death of our First Amendment.
It is.
And the fact that people do not understand the gravity of this situation is mind-blowing to me, especially talking heads on TV.
Well, that's why tomorrow night's show is so very important, and hopefully it will have double the audience that the Donziger live stream had. The precedent has been set. I think that they do a fantastic job.
It's good, but the people, none of us are free until Julian Assange is free.
That's true.
We're just not. Like, it's a big friggin' deal.
Yeah, you gotta. There's a lot of times where people speak up when it isn't politically convenient to do so, and that's what we're doing now. So,
well, I'll always speak up when it's inconvenient to do so. I live for being inconvenient.
I am
all about inconvenient.
So, as we said,
what do we have coming up?
So on Sunday, we will have, as we mentioned, Rebecca Jones, who is candidate for U.S. Congress in Florida's 1st district, running against Matt Gaetz.
Matt Petter-ass Gaetz.
Matt Petter-ass Gaetz. And then we will be speaking with former military officer Alton Pete. Oh, I believe
Alton or Alton.
We'll find out. But
well, we're like tomato every time.
Tomato every time. But definitely tune in for that. And then, of course, as you guys know, next Wednesday,
it's Festivus. Guys, we're having a Festivus for the rest of us. So next Wednesday, we have. Are we going to tell people who guests are, or kind of keep a surprise? Is it like we have a really good group of people coming on to, especially for the airing of the grievances. We're still looking to cast a local person who wants to battle Peter in feats of strength. We're going to clear out the room. There's going to be feats of strength. I don't want it to have to be my 15-year-old being forced against his will. So if there's anybody here locally that want to challenge him, feats of strength, and there will be many Festivus miracles to be had. Also, you know, one of the things about Festivus is having meatloaf. So I found this really good vegan meatloaf recipe. That would I be making us meatloaf?
All right.
But I just thought if we're going to be doing, it would be like having
like a quinoa-based meatloaf or something.
I think it's chickpea and walnut or something like that.
Right,
I don't know. But anyway, my point being, we're going to set it up like you wouldn't have a Seder plate without the lamb shank. I don't think we can have a Festivus without the meatloaf. And since we don't eat meat, it's going to have to be a vegan.
Serenity now!
Insanity later.
That's for sure. Hope you enjoyed it, guys. We will see you on Sunday. Thanks for all your support.